All righty, welcome back. Here we go again. Today we're talking about the compound effect, jumpstart your income, your life, your success, written by Darren Hardy. And again, I'm joined by Ben Palis. So welcome, Ben.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Good to have you again. Our monthly book talk here. So this book, written by Darren Hardy, financially is very successful from a young age. Like made a lot of money at 18, bought a very large house at like 20, 21, something like that. He was a publisher for Success Magazine. He's a serial entrepreneur, written multiple books. This one here, 10th anniversary, over 1 million copies sold. So he's he's been around. He's done a few things. So, Ben, what are your initial thoughts of the compound effect?
All right. I'm going to be brutally blunt and honest, as we talked about before. So I picked up this book and was fairly excited about it. I'd heard about it for quite some time, and read the entire book on a flight coming back from JFK back to Salt Lake City, and I actually knocked it out in about half that flight. So I'm going to sum it up by saying this. It's a very simple book with very simple strategies that you can choose to follow. And maybe it's because I'm old now and I have some life experience. I found myself saying over and over and over again, anytime that he introduced a new topic, I just kept saying, well, no shit. And that's what I said over and over and over again. Well, no shit. So I'll say this, and if you're a 20-year-old and don't have a whole lot of life experience yet, I think this book could be useful to that person. I was going to hand it off to my almost 21-year-old daughter. Who I think there's some strategies and some examples that you could find beneficial if you're a younger person and are looking for some different ideas. But I think for those of us that have gotten a little bit longer in the tooth, a lot of us know shit.
Yeah, well, I have to agree with you, man. I actually came across this book, the audio version, several years ago, and when I listened to it, I found it pretty helpful and some cool concepts in there. Some of which I still stick to. I think are really awesome. But when you look at the entire book, after having been doing this podcast for some time, reading some really interesting books like Atomic Habits, or when little pieces of some of Jocko's books, or the True Believer, which we'll talk about next month. Various things, right? Start with why. Each one of those books has a better version of multiple topics in here. And so when you're reading this one, you're like, okay, so he skimmed the surface of a few good ideas, but it just didn't feel very like detailed, in depth, or original, right? Um, but like you said, for somebody that's looking for like some strategy, some new motivation, something that's going to hit on various aspects of how to become successful from where you are, building new habits, changing those habits, create your routines. What's the advantage of having daily routines, et cetera? How does that compound on each other and turn into success? It's a nice little manual. Well, that being said, let's go ahead and talk about some of them. I think there are some valuable things that we could pull from this, and that's what we want to do here is create some value for people to take home with them. So I guess that's the luxury of just listening to this podcast is you get the highlights of various books and steps you can implement into your life to really improve your life, right? So first thing I kind of highlighted here is in chapter 2, choices. He says choices are at the root of every one of your results. Each choice starts a behavior that over time becomes a habit. So choose poorly and you just might find yourself back at the drawing board, forced to make new, often harder choices. Don't choose at all and you've actually made the choice to be the passive receiver of whatever comes your way. In essence, you make your choices and then your choices make you. Every decision, no matter how slight, alters the trajectory of your life. Now, I talk about this principle kind of a lot, and he actually said that Jim Rohn is one of his mentors, and I listen to Jim Rohn a lot. I think Jim Rohn was had an interesting way of breaking down things into simple little statements and quirky little theme lines. But Jim Rohn talks about accumulated success and accumulated disaster. And people don't often think of accumulated disaster, right? But if you are very slothful in your life, you're lazy about things, you put in the minimum effort at work, you put in hardly any effort in your personal life, and your goal is just to get from day to day watching TV kind of stuff, your health slowly deteriorates, your relationships slowly deteriorate, your value at work deteriorates, right? Over time, you're accumulating a disastrous life. And then you find yourself with poor relationships with no money to retire on, right? And the flip side is take small incremental steps every day, put in the effort, create your routines, make good choices daily, 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 and you accumulate the opposite of everything I just said: success at work, great relationships, health, physical health, mental health, emotional health, right? So, I think that's a concept worth thinking about in your life, especially as we were saying, like if you're a young person reading this book, get started on the right foot, right? Change your life right now so that you've got the next 20, 30, 40 years to really make a big impact and live the latter third of your life in a luxurious way.
Yeah, I'll just chip in on a couple things. Um, Choices have consequences, and I think we all know this. But we try to teach our kids this, as young as possible. The choices you make have consequences down the line, and if you, like you said, start making the habit of making bad choices, you end up in bad places. If you start making the habit of making good choices, more than likely you're going to end up in a good place. And that's the compound effect that he talks about in here, is that when you compound good choices, you go great places. When you compound bad choices, well, you go into bad places. And Jordan Peterson talked a lot more about that in his book. Um, we don't have to go back into that. Listen to that podcast because that book was pretty awesome and very in depth.
Right? 12 rules for life. Similar theme in Atomic Habits, as we've already mentioned, right? Where it's like if you can make small incremental changes and make your day kind of set up your day to day routines in a way that marches you towards ultimate goals, right? Larger scale goals. You'll stay on track. You'll eventually get there. And, you know, kind of reminds me, I think it was a Bruce Lee saying where he's like, I don't fear the man that does 1,000 kicks in one day. I fear the man that does one kick over 1,000 days, right? And the point is someone who has set up their life with a certain amount of like daily determination to continue to improve um, is the one you want to be afraid of, at least in the fight game, right? And I think that applies to business, relationships, etc. You don't just show up one day, spoil your wife with a bunch of flowers and a vacation, and now your marriage is good.
No, she sees through
it's
that.
it's the it's the person that shows up daily in smaller ways that builds a strong relationship, right? So um, those daily choices impact everything. And that, like you said, the compounding effect of those choices is what we're really trying to capture in this book specifically. Here's a funny line that I found entertaining. He says, owning 100%. We're all self made men and women, but only the successful take credit for it.
That's true.
It's not only funny, but it's true, right? Like people that aren't successful want to claim the victim card most often. People that are successful are like, I
I
did
did it.
this, you
Yep.
know. Funny dichotomy. But the point is own your life, take credit for it. There are external influences that are out of your control, but your reaction to the scenarios you're in, the way you use your time, energy, talents, the way you develop those things is all up to you, right? So you're better off just owning 100% of your life and saying, I'm going to do everything I can with everything I've got, and we'll see where that takes me. And I guarantee it's going to be better, right?
Yeah, exactly. Extreme ownership in everything is something that I have really tried to incorporate into my daily life. And so, whether your life is successful or not as successful as you would like it to be, that of course is always the first step in owning where you're at, um, finding it within yourself to be able to reconcile that the choices that you made got you to where you are. You're not a victim. And I'll say that for 99.99% of Americans, you're not a victim. Um, you may have been put in circumstances that made it tougher for you than others, 100%, but you're not a victim. As we learned from Goggins, you're not a victim. You can improve your life. You can do the things necessary to take you to where you want to be. But you have to be accountable to yourself first off, and realize that wherever you're at in life, you got yourself there. And now it's up to you to get yourself out of it, or to get yourself to somewhere that you want to be.
Absolutely. Goggins is a good example of that. I like that. Someone who had an incredibly rough start in life. He had some advantages and disadvantages, but all the trauma and abuse that he went through early probably should have put him on a track to jail, right? And instead, he's become a very inspirational, successful person in many aspects of life. So it's a good example. So, still on the topic of choices, he says, when I say small course corrections, I'm talking truly invisible. Chances are no one's going to notice them anytime soon. There will be no applause. No one's going to send you a congratulations card or a trophy for these disciplines. And yet, eventually, their compounding effect will result in an exceptional payoff. It's the little disciplines that pay off over time, the effort and preparation for the great triumph that happened when no one was looking, and yet the results are exceptional. A horse wins the race by a nose, but gets 10 times the prize money. Is the horse 10 times faster? No, just a little bit better. But it was those extra laps around the track, the extra discipline in the horse's nutrition, or the extra work by the jockey that made the results a slight bit better with compounded rewards. So, after hundreds of tournaments played and thousands of strokes tallied, the difference between the number one ranked golfer and the number 10 golfer is an average of 0.32 strokes. But the difference in prize money is more than double, 9.6 million versus 4.6. The number one golfer isn't 5 times better, not even 50% or 10% better. In fact, his average score is only 0.5% better, yet the results are more than double. And he has some figures in the book that kind of represent this thing, but that is the primary thing I took from this book as kind of a light bulb moment, is like, all your hard work doesn't have to make you exponentially better than the competition or than your previous self. You just need to be a slight bit better, right? When you're thinking of just the typical employee interviewing for a job, or not even interviewing, but hoping to get the promotion, it's like, if you've done a few extra things, you got some certificate or a new degree or something that you've been working on for a while, and now all of a sudden it comes time to interviewing and the competition is very similar to your old self, and you've just increased your capabilities or resume just a bit more, chances are you get the job. So you're not exponentially better than the competition, you're slightly better than the competition, and you get the raise, you get the promotion, you get the deal, right? And so I really like that, especially the golfer one, right? It's like this, they're not that much better than the first place golfer is not that much better than the 10th place golfer. In fact, very, very slight difference, but their pay is way bigger.
That kind of struck a chord with me just from the last couple days, because your pay will even be bigger golfing now if you join the new Saudi golf league and get off the PGA tour, I guess. So there's still ways to
For
cheat.
real?
Yeah, yeah.
I
Oh,
didn't
you
know that.
haven't caught that yet?
No.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You need to look it up. So there's a whole thing going on right now with golf and the PGA Tour versus, and I'm trying to remember the name of the new this new Saudi sponsored golf league that Greg Norman is the CEO of, and they've offered some gigantic amounts of money for golfers to
Oh
come
my
play.
gosh.
And Mickelson just went over there, and I think they teed off yesterday for the first one, and the PGA put out an announcement saying, "You're all done with the PGA Tour. You're off. You're never coming back." Yeah, but anyway, um, yeah. So the golf struck a chord right now. But there is something to be said for that, where you don't have to be heads and tails above everybody else, but you do have to be a little bit better to get that next promotion. Or as I told my daughters growing up the entire time, and especially when they were playing sports, you know, you just have to suck less than the next person. That's how you get noticed. Suck less. You don't have to be the best. Just suck less than the next person.
That's funny. Yeah. No, I love the idea though, in sports, in business, in marriage, in anything like um, you gain tiny little incremental advantages and they pay off exponentially, right? So pretty cool idea. So in this next example, he's talking about um, sort of your why. Is your why big enough? Does it pull you? And again, better book, start with why. But um, the idea is you can't really live on like willpower alone to make yourself change your habits and your daily routines and all these things. So you got to have a why, right? And his example is actually pretty good. He says, if I laid down a 20-foot board and said, if you walk across this board, I'll give you $20. It's like, sure, I'll walk across a board for $20. And he's like, now what if I put it across the top of two super high buildings, right? $20. It's like, no way. $20 does not seem worth it to risk my life to walk across this board. And then he says, now imagine the building's on fire and your children are over there. You're going to walk across the board, right? And of course, you're going to walk across the board because the why changed. The difficulty didn't change, but the why did, right? That's an example of having a nice, a strong why, something that really pulls you along. So if your why is very weak and you just want to lose weight because someone on TV looks good and you want to kind of be like that, it's just not very tough. So your willpower, the sort of struggle to get to the gym and eat better all the time is going to overpower that why. But if you have a much stronger why, you really connect your fitness level with your health and your longevity, and you want to make sure that you can see your grandkids and play with them, and it's like you've you've deepened the why. You'll be much more likely to keep these habits that you're trying to create in a positive way.
Yeah, and that's so true. I'm going to relate something back to career. When I have been successful in my career and those career choices is when I have a really good why. Why am I doing this because I believe in it, or am I just going through the motions because I need a job at the time and there hasn't been much of anything else available. So a good why will get you much further. Know what your motivation is. Why are you actually doing things? And I'll go a little bit serious here for a minute. Um, so the school shooting massacre down in Uvalde, Texas. As all the things are starting to come out of who did what and why, it's been fascinating. The police are taking a lot of heat because I don't think they thought to themselves that they had a good why on why they should go into that classroom right away and try to neutralize that gunman. I saw an interview this week with one of the mothers who heard what was happening, drove to the school, got out, tried to go across a fence to go get her kids, was tackled by some of those police officers, put in handcuffs because they weren't going to let her go get her kids, put her in handcuffs. She convinced one of the local cops to get her out of the handcuffs. She immediately took off, sprinted, climbed the fence, ran into the school, got her kids out of the school, took them to safety 35 minutes before the police decided to do anything. because she had a
Wow.
why. Yeah, she wanted to save her children, right? So when you talk about the birding building, and if your kids are on the other side, well, that's actually what happened with her. Um, I mean,
That
it,
is
it really,
insane.
really incredible, right? That's an extreme why. But if you have that type of why in your career or your relationship or things that you actually want to do, that is really going to motivate you to develop the habits to get you where you want to be.
Well said, man. That's an incredible story. I can't believe that, and I've heard rumblings of that. I try not to watch too much news because I feel like it focuses on all the terror that happens out there. But I've heard about the police sort of how slow they were to actually take action, and that other parents were rescuing kids on the other side. It's like, what the hell are we doing here? But that is amazing.
Yep, it was. It's really amazing.
All right. Who you have to become. He says, one principle Jim Rohn taught me is if you want to have more, you have to become more. Success is not something you pursue. What you pursue will elude you. It can be like trying to chase butterflies. Success is something you attract by the person you become. I think that's an interesting principle. I post about this a lot on Instagram, right? Where it's like, uh, if you want to have more, you need to become more because it's not about tricking people. It's not about getting lucky. It's about having daily routines, having a life that's set up in a way to prepare you to take advantages of opportunities that come your way. There are opportunities everywhere, but your perspective changes the way you see or completely miss those opportunities. Sometimes you'll be talking to people about a business that they're in, and you might have ideas they've never even thought of, and you're going like, holy cow, like, you're obviously not digging in and trying to figure out all the avenues here. Whereas then there's the opposite, where it's just like somebody just starts a new business every few years and they're always successful. It's like, what the hell? How are they so quote unquote lucky? Well, it's not luck. They prepare. They see the world differently. They've done the homework. They've set their lives up in a way that allows them to take advantage of opportunities that come their way that present themselves, right? And some of that is going out and creating opportunities, and some of it's just being ready to capture, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that I think is something that all of us can and should be able to relate to, is to look for opportunities and then have the courage to try to capitalize on those opportunities when you see them, or at least to keep your eyes open for them. Um, in work right now, I think there's a big opportunity that's opened up that some other people maybe are a little bit blind to. So I've tried to set myself up to be able to capitalize on it, put myself in position where I think others are going to run into me once they finally recognize what's happening. And it's those types of things that when you can recognize it, put yourself in line to be able to succeed with it. I think that's how a lot of us really are able to get ahead.
And to me, that's exciting. Like, I'm not just I don't want to like, obviously I want to make tons of money, but I don't just want money. I want to be a really good version of myself that has earned the money. In fact, I've often said, like, do I even want to win the lottery or some like truly lucky thing? Or do I want to earn that title? You know what I mean? Of the self-made multimillionaire that's influenced people and created freedom, right? Like, to me, the journey seems so much better. Like, I have Kobe Bryant behind me. That dude put in so many hours starting at a young age to become an incredible basketball player. And when he talks about the living the dream, that's his whole Mamba mentality thing. It's like, it's the dream isn't the 5 championships. The dream is getting up at 4 a.m. when you didn't want to and putting in that workout anyway, right? The dream is doing all those things in the dark that no one sees in order to make it there. He says the satisfaction from doing what you told yourself you were going to do in order to achieve that thing is as satisfying or more than the championships, you know? And so becoming that person required to achieve these big goals is as intriguing to me as just having the money or the title.
Well, for sure, because while having money is nice, um, and I feel like there's a certain amount of money that you make. Once you hit that, anything more is you're buying toys, right? And so okay, fine, that's nice, but how you get there, I think, is really important. And one of the points that Darren Hardy put in this book here is that sometimes wealth skips a generation, or I guess increasing in wealth skips a generation. And the reason behind it is because, like if I've seen this a lot, if someone's parents are extremely wealthy, they don't have to work for it. And so they don't care in many cases. And so they just kind of skate by through life and, it is what it is. And daddy will take care of me and it's all good. Whereas then their kids maybe didn't have the same uh, successes or have the same amount of money, and so then they work harder for it to try to achieve back maybe what their grandfather did. So I think working for things is I think many of us have learned throughout life is much more satisfying than if someone just gives you something. Um,
Mhm.
you don't take it for granted. You appreciate it more, and you're able to tell yourself, "Hey, you know what? I went out and did this, or at least I was a part of something that went out and did something great to increase my financial wealth and bring some prosperity for my family."
The accumulated change in your character in order to accumulate success. I just think I think that's more inspiring to me. All right, so let's jump forward to some of his suggestions on how to implement change, instill good habits, eliminate bad habits. Okay. So, eliminating a bad habit means removing something from your routine. Instilling a new, more productive habit requires an entirely different skill set. He says leadership expert John C. Maxwell said, "You will never change your life until you change something you do daily. The secret of your success is found in your daily routine. According to research, it takes 300 instances of positive reinforcement to turn a new habit into an unconscious practice. That's almost a year of daily practice." I think a lot of people try and actually say that it's like 70 days or it's 90 days or whatever. And there's probably some truth to that in that it's like becomes easier. But when I've talked to like therapists about changing really ingrained habits, they say more like 1 to 2 years. It can even be longer than he's saying. And what he's saying is for it to become an unconscious behavior. And I would side with him on that. I've seen people change their lives every January at the gym for 60 or 90 days. And then I posted a picture the other day. I said, "Well, it's the first week of May now, so there's about 5 fit people still coming." Right? I think it takes a lot more than 90 days to really make something just a truly ingrained habit and pattern in your life.
I think you're exactly right. I think it takes a lot longer than what people think that it does. Your brain it's a strange and funny organ, the way that it works, and it's easy to fall back into doing things the way that you've always done. You bring up the gym, and it used to always crack me up where, yeah, I hated going to the gym in January. Just hated it because every machine had somebody on it and two others waiting, and there were no free weights. And it's like, oh, this is ridiculous. And then you come to March and it's back to normal. There's hardly anybody there. And you're like, okay, this is fantastic. you know,
Yeah.
it's like the Cubs. The Cubs are always in the pennant race in April, maybe the first week of May. And then after that, yeah, sorry, Cubs fans.
Yes. That's hilarious. Okay, so let's jump into the 6 things then. We'll just kinda quickly go through those. He says, "Set yourself up to succeed." Now, physically, emotionally, mentally, like, set up yourself, right? get things visible that need to be visible, eliminate things that need to be invisible, right? If you're talking about diet, get the junk out of your house. Like, set yourself up, get yourself in a scenario where you can actually succeed, where your triggers around you reinforce positive behavior, and eliminate those triggers that reinforce negative behavior. Number two, think addition, not subtraction. I kind of liked this one. He says that he was talking to Montel Williams, a former talk host, and he said, "He told me about the strict diet he maintains because of the disease that afflicts him, multiple sclerosis. Montel has adopted something called the add-in principle, and I think it's a wildly effective tool for anyone with any goal. It's not so much what you attempt to take out of your diet," he explained to me, "it's what you put in it. This has become his analogy for life. Instead of thinking that he has to deprive himself or take something out of his diet, I can't eat that hamburger or chocolate or dairy or whatever, he thinks about what he can have instead. Today I'm going to have a salad, steamed vegetables and fresh figs. He fills his focus and his belly with what he can have, so he no longer has attention or hunger for what he can't." I think that's a pretty interesting shift in your mindset, right? Diet's always one everyone's battling, right? There's so many available goodies and shelf food right now that it's overwhelming, and they all taste good, and they're not that healthy, and they don't help you achieve those fitness goals or long term health goals, and so it's hard to think I can't have this entire cookie aisle, but what can you have? Well, you can have steak. You can have a nice fillet of chicken, right? Or a nice fillet of salmon. It's, I think it's an interesting mindset. Also in business, it's not about what you can't have. It's what you get to participate in. It's what principles you get to learn. It's what principles you're going to instill in your life, what characteristics you're going to instill in yourself.
Yeah, and this is something that I learned a long time ago, and really tried to develop my mindset around that. And I put it back to, as a person in your philosophy in life, is the glass half full or is it half empty? And that's really how you have to look at things in life. Instead of thinking, like you said, things that you're taking out, what do you get to add in? When I think about a long business trip, I have to focus on the good things. Well, what do I get to do that are going to be fun and enjoyable? Is it the road trip part? Do I get to meet some new and interesting people? Do I get to have, you know, the opportunity to have some really in-depth, fantastic conversations with some new physicians or nurses or something like that? Do I get to go try some food in a new part of the country? You have to look at the positive things in life, no matter what you're doing. But I do like that example of having people think about what you get to add into your life and not what you take out. Like you said with diet, oh, I have to give up chocolate or potato chips or whatever. But what can you add in? Yeah, I can add in a nice steak because that's pretty good too.
Yeah. I think it's a very applicable to finance as well, which is another one that people struggle with. They hate to have a budget or they don't want to restrict their spending or something, right? But I've been broke and I've had access and I've had excess. and to me, telling myself I get to have extra money, financial security in times of like losing a job or needing extra money or wanting to just take a break from working, period. I can because I've managed my money well versus the flip side, paycheck to paycheck, broke, debt collectors might be calling or whatever. It's like, man, if you had just told yourself I can have financial fitness, freedom, and security when it came time to purchasing those dumb, expenditures that you made, your life would be different. But instead, if you're focused on the like, oh, I can't even go out tonight. I can't go have these drinks. I can't go golfing, whatever, all the things you're missing out on. Well, if you do buy that, then you can't have something else. So flip the whole script and say what I can have and what I'm intentionally going to pass on because this is what I want, right? It all comes back to defining your ultimate goal and having your real why. Anyway, we won't beat that horse anymore. But number 3, go for a PDA. He says public display of accountability. May not be appropriate in all settings, but it certainly doesn't hurt to try and get a few people on board with what you're up to. I've actually heard the opposite at times, though. Where did I hear this? Anyway, I've heard somebody told me that when you tell others what you're going to do, the satisfaction or like feelings of achievement, the same feeling comes just from telling them as would have happened if you had achieved it. And so people actually achieve less.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing because you get that same dopamine hit in your brain in relaying it. Look, this is what I'm going to do, and how exciting is this? You get that feedback and the dopamine hit, and you're like, cool. Now maybe I don't have to be nearly as excited and go and do it. Yeah, so sometimes keeping things to yourself is better.
Since I've heard kind of both versions into that, I'm gonna say that uh I think it depends on your personality and what the goal is. Because like for example, Order of Man, Ryan Mickler in his book, he talks about when he did what is it called? An agogi race where it's like a 60-mile race and they have all these different obstacles in it. And they said that, he let him have some sleep. And then like 1 hour later, he wakes them up from their sleep that they thought they were going to have and has them keep going and all this stuff. Right. And Ryan says one of his motivators at that moment, after he got woken up and he was all in pain and his feet were hurting and all this stuff. It's like, well, I had just told 60,000 people that I was going to do this, right?
I can't let them.
Yeah, and so it's like, in that situation, it seems like the public display of accountability was probably helpful. So I wonder if this may be scenario by scenario. Okay, number 4, find a success buddy. There are few things as powerful as two people locked arm in arm marching toward the same goal. And I resonate with that. I've been a dabbler in the podcast and YouTube world for a long time, but I didn't actually get serious about it until, the first of the year. And you were part of that. I was like, okay, Ben, this is what we're going to do. Would you like
Now
to
we have.
join me? We're going to be accountable. We're going to make it happen. We're going to talk about it all the time. And honestly, it's been easy. Like, I'm not gonna say that the day to day's been easy. Sometimes it's hard to manage 4 kids, get to 4 different baseball leagues, dentist appointments, etcetera, and still read and get a podcast done. That's not easy. But my motivation has always been there, partly because I know we're gonna show up and do this, and, it has been incredibly helpful.
I agree. I agree with the concept, and with you and I, it's worked out really well. So yeah, I think a success buddy. I hate the term. I don't even like saying it. It just bugs me. I don't know why, but anyway, if you have a partner to help you do things, right, or to help motivate you, hey, it's fantastic. That's good because it keeps you. It not only keeps you motivated, but it keeps you in on the path going in the right direction, and I think that's great. The example, or one of the examples that he put in here, I really didn't care for at all. Um, and maybe this is just me because Jordan Peterson kind of said the same thing as well of surround yourself with like-minded people. um, don't surround yourself with those who aren't up to your own standard and may drag you down. And I just I hate that concept, but maybe they're right. I don't know. That's something I've been thinking about for several weeks since I read it in Jordan Peterson's book. But now he says kind of the same type of thing. Surround yourself with like-minded people. I think there's something to be said for that.
There's probably various scenarios where having an echo chamber of people just like you is a good thing. And then there's arguments to be made about the opposite, right? How are you going to get diversity of opinion? How are you going to learn new things if you don't have conflict, different perspectives, and different levels of success, etc. Uh, there's also kind of that idea that, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are, that you're going to become the average of the people that you hang out with. I think there's some truth to that in a lot of scenarios because most people are more like sheep than lions, right? And so you sort of have to define and understand who you are and where you're going. And are you one of those people that plows through despite what's around you, or are you one of those people that would rather kind of be a chameleon and go, you know what, I'd rather just feel comfortable and be similar to the people I'm around? And so there's probably arguments to be made about various aspects of this. But as far as the buddy, getting somebody on board with where you're going, I think it's very helpful. That's why movie stars have trainers show up to their house and help them work out. It's like it's just easier to get a good hard workout in when someone shows up and goes, "Let's do this," you know?
That's true. Instead of you having to drag your butt out to go to the gym in January and the first week of February, and then you stop.
Exactly. So, like, ever since COVID, I haven't played basketball in the mornings, but we used to have an email list that would go out uh, the day before, and we would all mark whether or not we'll be there, so that we could make sure we had 10 guys. If not, we wouldn't even go, right? And so when there was only 10 guys, you're like, I'm number 10. I don't want to make them play with 9 because I was lazy. So when that alarm goes off at 5 or 4 in the morning, you're like, "Oh, I gotta go." And it's helpful, you know, changes you. It changes your performance on those bad days. You know what, that kind of leads me to an interesting idea that I just heard yesterday. I was listening to some talks from Patrick Bet David. If you haven't heard him, he's pretty awesome. He does valuetainment. Um, anyway, super successful guy. He was showing a chart of people's work patterns, and it had a variety of different metrics and how they rate it, but it was showing that some people, they work really, really hard, and it seems like when they get paid, they make a bunch of money, they quit working for like an extended period of time, and then they got to redo it all, and then they quit, and so their life pattern is these like big effort and then no effort, big effort, no effort, and they never get very wealthy. And then there was those people that they work more consistently, a little longer, but then they also have these like big lulls. And anyway, the bottom line is the most successful people, their average or their average peak work days were 9-hour days, but their bottom 100 work days were 8-hour days. They never had days that were like no effort. They didn't have these extended, drawn out periods of like no effort or 4 hours a day or anything. And so he said success is the average of your bottom 100 days. I was like, oh wow, that's pretty interesting. And you got to look up the chart because it explains it better than I just did. But your bottom 100 is really what's going to determine your success. And so that's where the accountability buddy can really push you through, right? It's like those crappy days when you're like, I'm tired, I'm not doing this. And yet the trainer shows up and says, let's do this. You're like, oh, shit. Okay. Get to work.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. If you listen to if you listen to Jocko or you listen to Goggins, you know those guys when it comes to workouts, like they don't take a day off. They may not hit the peak every stinking day, but they never take a day off. You listen to Goggins, and he's at least doing some sort of stretching and some light calisthenics or something just to keep that habit going. And I think it's the same with work. I mean, I could believe that 100% that how far you get, is probably determining off of your lowest 100 days. Because yeah, I mean, if you put in a monumental effort and then stop, well, eventually somewhere you're going to meet in the middle. And if you're doing 100 and 0, well, you're going to average out at 50. Whereas if you're doing, 90 and 85, well, 87 and a half is pretty dang good.
Right. It's better than most. And what we learned from Atomic Habits is like it's so much easier to decline than to incline, right? To increase. So in the stock market, for example, If you have $100,000 and lose 50%, you now have $50,000. But that doesn't now mean you have to increase 50% because 50% of 50 is only 25. So you've got to now increase 100%, right? So he used the stock market to illustrate protecting your downside, right? At least don't go backwards. So on your worst days, if you at least don't go backwards, you kind of maintain, then on your good days you make progress, and then your bad days you never go backwards. You're only progressing, right? Like so there's never a decline, and I think that illustrates it well with like, you know what? You got to show up however it is. And he actually kind of brings that up in his fifth point. He says competition and camaraderie. So he ran this competition with his employees to do this workout thing. But I love this story he gives about Robert Ravencraft. So he says, to give an example of this, last summer I organized a consistency challenge for our 350,000 Darren Daily members. We called it the 90-Day Raven Run Challenge, named after the famous South Beach runner Robert Ravencraft. Raven has run 8 miles on the white sand of South Beach, Miami for more than 45 years. At the time of this writing, he has never missed a single day through hurricanes, shin splints, broken bones, food poisoning, pneumonia, and more. The challenge was simple: run at least 1 mile a day every day for 90 days. Hey, if Raven can run 8 miles for 16,500 plus days, we can do it for 90 days, no excuses. So kind of illustrates what we're talking about, but like, man, 16,000 plus days never missing. I thought that was amazing. Like that when your life is that way, like I'm going to run a Spartan race here in July. And some people that I tell are like, "Oh, I could never do that." Do you think Robert Kraft would be like, a Spartan race? That'd be so hard. He's like, "Oh, I run essentially half of that every single day of my life. I don't think it'd be that hard to just one time do twice as much." Like it changes your whole world when you can consistently work on difficult things.
It's funny. I heard of this guy like 20 years ago, and I don't remember. Some news program did a special on him. Like, I mean, literally, I think it was probably 20 years ago, and I was like, that's pretty amazing. The guy, through hurricanes and everything down there in South Florida, does this every single day and never misses. And that's some consistency to be proud of. And just imagine if we were all able to do something like that in our life, right? What kind of gains could we make, no matter what it is? How much better would your life be if you were able to have that type of consistency? It was pretty amazing.
Right. So his last point, number 6, celebrate. Now, Ben, in our former work life, we would go have a hell of a party once a year, right? And we would celebrate our successes and the things we had done. And there would be live music and food and drinks, and it was just off the charts, right? And I think that boosts morale. It helps you look back on the last 12 months or whatever your goal was, and say, look at all these things we did, look at all this effort we put in, look at all those hard nights, let's laugh about those long days, those tough journeys, those crappy flights, and then here we are partying, having a good time, right? And so I think there's something to it. Certainly don't just always keep your head down and say it's always a grind and it's always right. Sure, work hard the day you celebrate, but also celebrate the things you've done. It helps with reflection. It helps with morale. It helps with kind of that dopamine of like, we did something, we achieved it. Now what's next? Let's create another one, another reason to celebrate, another opportunity to come together and enjoy it.
Celebration is such an important part of life, not only in your work life but also in your personal life. That's something that my wife definitely taught me. Where she does much better if she has something to look forward to, something that she knows that we're going to celebrate. No matter what it is, and that's been a fantastic thing to learn. because it makes all of the hard days more worthwhile when you have something that you know that you're going to celebrate, and then when you're there, being able to reflect on all of the hard things that you did, and it really can help you push to do something even more monumental the next time. So yeah, I think celebrating's it's fantastic. It's something we all need to do. And I'll just make one more point on leadership. If you are in a leadership position, this is something that you have to do. You have to celebrate your people's wins, especially in a work atmosphere.
Mhm.
You have to celebrate with them. You have to tell people that they're doing an excellent job, or if they do something out of the ordinary, you have to celebrate with them, because then they're willing to do it again and to push even further. So, as a leadership strategy, celebration is amazing.
So I agree with you. There's actually we did an episode a long time ago called "How to Lead Virtual Teams," and that was intentionally done because of COVID. And I had a medical staffing agency that was completely virtual. Like I live in Salt Lake or near Salt Lake. I had a virtual office in Idaho. Had contracts in multiple states around the country, and all my employees were in other places. So it was completely leading virtual teams. And then COVID, of course, made a lot of people go virtual. And leading virtual teams is even like that times 10. Like you've got to really give a lot more positive feedback than you used to, because there's no more cooler talk. There's no going to lunch, those kinds of things, right? So it's like celebrate them, celebrate them. So slight right turn there, but on the topic of like what you're talking about as a leader, making sure that you keep people motivated, there's got to be a lot of at least like mini celebrations as well as large scale. So Ben,
All right. There is one other thing. I'm gonna put it out there. Darren Hardy, if this gets out to you, we need to have a chat about this, because I think you messed up as a leader when it came to this. And I'm calling you out on it. So in your book here, you talk about an employee that obviously wasn't making anything, right? And you talk about how successful you are and how much money you've made. Well, you have an employee that obviously you weren't paying very well, right? And she wanted to have more money in her life, right? So you called it out yourself that you taught her to save 10% of her income by doing it a little bit at a time. Okay, great concept. However, as a leader, I'm going to put out something a little bit different to you. Okay. Well, let's follow this track down. All right. So you taught her how to save, right? She began to save, yada yada yada. She left you. She left your company and became successful. And then you ran into her at an airport and saw how successful she had come. Buddy, you messed up, because you had a person in there that obviously you could have valued more, and maybe she would have stayed with your company and helped you become even more successful. So I'm just going to say, if you wanted to teach her how to save 10%, you probably should have given her a 10% raise, asked her to save it, taught her that lesson, and then she probably would have worked harder for you, might have stayed with your organization, and made you more money in the long run. Leadership example.
oh, you're calling Darren out right here, man. That's funny. I think, yeah, you know what? You got some good points there. Uh, you certainly can get a lot of value out of people by helping them achieve their potential and their dreams, right? In the book The Alliance talks about what are your employees' goals and how can they fit into the company that's here, right? Because if you have someone who's driven to have more, is there an opportunity within your organization to help them achieve that goal for you, and they'll stay within the organization. But in that case, she wasn't happy with $40,000 a year. She went out and made herself 225,000 a year.
Right, exactly. So, Darren, if you want to talk about it, let us know.
So the last thing that I want to point out is momentum. I think he makes a good point here. in that, momentum is an incredibly powerful force. I mean, it's insanely powerful in social media. I used to run a healthcare page. I still have it, I guess. It's called Nurse Culture. And I was doing a bunch of memes and stuff, but as I started getting momentum, suddenly I go from like getting 3 and 4,000 views to 60,000 just within a matter of weeks, because as people started catching on and enjoying the content, they're sharing, they're liking, the algorithms suddenly start playing in my favor, right? And so um it's easy to see in social media, but it happens in all other aspects of life as well. Like when you're getting more clients, when you're getting more revenue, you're celebrating your wins. Like when you have these frequent wins and things like that, it's like morale stays high. People don't want to leave. People want to be a part of what you got, right? So it's interesting. But some of his examples that he throws in here, I thought were uh, pretty solid. It says Newton's first law, also known as the law of inertia, objects at rest tend to stay at rest unless acted on by an outside force. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion unless something stops their momentum. Put another way, couch potatoes tend to stay couch potatoes. Achievers, people who get into a successful rhythm, continue busting their butts and end up achievers more and more. He goes on to talk about inertia and gravity and all these things. He says a similar concept happens with rocket ships, right? Uh, the space shuttle uses more fuel during the first few minutes of its flight than it does the rest of the entire trip. Why? Because it has to break free from the pull of gravity. Once it does, it can glide in orbit. The hard part, getting off the ground, your old ways and your old conditioning are just like the inertia of the merry-go-round or the pull of gravity. Everything wants to stay at rest. Uh, I find that to be true, in life. Trying to start a business, oh man, what's the first thing you should do? Can you do it all yourself? Do you need to hire people? Like, do you need to raise capital? Like, what's your first client? I mean, when I was starting a staffing agency, I didn't have contracts for nurses and I didn't have nurses to work contracts. So what am I going to do, right? That there's no momentum. It's extremely hard. You don't know where to go. I didn't take any paychecks. I started in January. I didn't take a single dime until July. And then those the latter half of the year we made $90,000 profit in the first year. Did $650,000 in revenue, right? So it's like there was no momentum for a long freaking time. It took a lot of effort to just get off the ground. And then once it starts rolling, it's like, hey, I got contracts. I just need nurses. I got nurses. You want a contract? It's just everything gets easier and the momentum surely can come. Same with fitness. Uh, I'm sure everybody's run into people that just crave a workout. You know, if you haven't ever been in that spot, it's because you haven't built that inertia up, right? I was a college athlete and I freaking craved the gym. And then over COVID, I got out of shape, man. I was in the worst shape of my life. And actually getting back to the gym was kind of difficult. I was like, oh, the workouts are hard. I don't want to get up early. It's like my energy's lower than ever in my life. And so getting to the gym was hard. And then not too long later, it was like, I can't wait to get up and go to the gym. Right. So it's that starting that's really hard.
For sure. I mean, momentum's a real thing, and with momentum, I always relate it back to sports. And the crazy thing is, you can actually, if you're watching, or even if you're participating, you can actually feel it. Right? It has like a physical feel to it. Momentum does. Like, if
Hmm.
you got a football team, and I'll throw out the Patriots versus the Falcons in the Super Bowl a few years back, where the Falcons just completely dominated the first half, and then you felt it. You could actually feel something change. And here come the Patriots, and they scored a touchdown, and you're like, Falcons are still 21 points ahead. Then they scored another one. Oh crap, they're only 14 ahead. And then immediately they scored another one. And they're only 7 ahead. Oh no. And you can feel that momentum actually build. And and shift. And I don't know, it's just it's an absolute crazy thing. But you're right, and that is the one good thing about this. You know, the the title of this book, The Compound Effect, is that especially with momentum, it does have a compound effect. Like you said, the first 6, 7 months of your business, it's just so tough to get anything moving. Then once it starts to move, it starts to compound on itself, and everything gets easier and easier and easier. And then as long as you keep adding to it, that momentum keeps moving for you. So
Yeah.
momentum, it's an amazing thing.
Pretty solid. So I know we've been a little bit critical of this book. There's also some very valuable things in here. So as we said, it's a nice manual for a list of things like how can you kind of get yourself off the ground? How can you shift your goals? Why does your daily routine need to be set up in a certain way that's marching you towards your goals? Um, Darren has been super successful himself. He's made millions and millions of dollars, written multiple books that have sold millions of copies, and he's worked for a variety of highly successful organizations, including ones that he's started himself. So definitely someone to take some words of wisdom from. We'll, as always, put the link in the show notes so that you can purchase this from Amazon if you would like it. The Compound Effect, jumpstart your income, your life, your success. Ben, thanks for joining me again today, and we'll catch everyone on the next one.